I'm in my recipe now, and I'm ready to start building out my team's lead intake process. I have a couple choices here. I could either pick a starting point to build for myself, or I can use my AI friend Copilot on the right side of the screen here to get me started. I know what I want to do today, so I'm going to let Copilot take a rest. We may visit Copilot again later. And let's pick a starting point. So it's important to think about when picking our starting point, what is going to be the business process that starts our automation? In this case, I want when my marketing team uploads a CSV file to Google Drive, that the automation will take effect. That will be our business action that's going to trigger the whole thing. Now, what makes sense to do that? Would it be triggering from an app, running on a schedule? You can make different cases for different starting points, but here, Google Drive is going to be our trigger here. That's what we're looking for in order to take action. So I will select trigger from app. And now it's time to select an app and a trigger event. And in this case, I want to go to Google Drive. And we have some different ways that Google Drive can trigger our recipe here. So when we're choosing our trigger here, we want to consider what our data will look like and where we are sending it. We want to take what could potentially be thousands of rows of CSV data, process them, upload them to Salesforce ultimately as leads. Real time might not be the best option for us here because we could be dropping in a ton of different CSV files throughout the day or even the week. That could be thousands of rows long. So we would want to do these process in chunks to make our recipe more performant. When we're trying to process data in chunks rather than one lead at a time, that's when we want to make use of batch processing. And batch processing just means that we can process multiple records at a time with just one job. We don't have to take it one lead at a time. We could upload 1,000 leads at a time or 10 leads at a time, whatever number makes sense for us. So in this case, we're going to trigger with a batch trigger. When there's a new CSV file in Google Drive, we can take batches of rows at a time to process our leads. So I will click New CSV file. I'll choose the events team service account for Google Drive as my connection here. And now I have some choices to make. First, when first started, this recipe should pick up events from a specific time period. Maybe I don't want to start this process just when new CSV files are added, but I also want to include historical data along with that. I can use this little time picker here to help me do that. So with my date picker, I can choose how far in the past I want to go, whether that's 1 hour or 1 year or even more. If I don't make a specification, by default, my recipe is going to pick up any CSV files that were added within the last hour from when this recipe is first started. Now, if I scroll down, I need to choose my parent folder here. The parent folder is going to be where we are looking for new files to appear. Automatically, my folders from Google Drive are populated here. So let's try to find our account. We want to find our new leads folder. So I'll scroll down and select that, and that will be acting as my parent folder. So anytime a new CSV is added to my new leads, it will be ready to be taken in and processed for Salesforce. Next, I need to choose a sample CSV file. This will tell us what column headers we should be expecting when we are processing this data. So we want to upload a CSV file that will have the column headers we need. I can either enter custom column names or I can select an existing CSV file. And the nice thing here is I can actually use a CSV file I already have in Google Drive to use as our reference point here. So if I go into my new leads folder here, I'll just select one of these CSV files. Next, I need to select a column delimiter. CSV file stands for comma separated value. And typically the values we're trying to import are separated by commas. This isn't always the case for all CSVs, though. It can also be spaces or tabs or colons. There are other ways to separate values besides commas, but commas are typically the most common. So we're going to select a comma here. Next, we want to indicate, does this contain a header line? So I select yes for contains header line. And next I can choose my batch size. We can choose how many rows at a time we want to take in from our CSV file here. To make our process more performant, we're not just doing one lead at a time from the CSV file. We can do 1,000 leads at a time. We can do any number at a time. When we're doing this, we want to consider where is the data going, though. If does the app that's going to be receiving this data take it in the same format? Ultimately, I want these leads to go into Salesforce, and Salesforce only allows for batches of 200 records at a time. So instead of doing a batch size of 1,000, which is the default, I'm going to select 200 so that it matches the downstream apps that are going to be receiving this information. Next, we can choose our expected encoding, which will default to UTF-8 encoding. That's what we see most commonly. You can choose other forms of encoding from the drop-down menu if you want them, though. And lastly, we have an optional field available where we can choose our trigger pull interval. Since this is a batch action, it's not going to trigger in real time, which means that it won't happen as soon as the file is added to Google Drive. We are trying to take a bunch of records in at once so that we're not constantly firing this all throughout the day. So let's take a look here. If we want to take a look at our trigger pull interval, it will default to checking our parent folder every 5 minutes if we don't specify, but we can choose how frequently we want to do our checks. And also, when selecting your trigger pull interval, consider how quickly you're going to need that data. Maybe you can wait the whole week and do just one big upload at the end of the week. Maybe you need it every day. Maybe you need it every 5 minutes. It depends how quickly these leads need to be acted upon.